Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to UK Construction Week online. And I'm delighted we've got this session this afternoon, indoor air quality and why it's important to get it right. Before I introduce our speaker, just to remind everybody that you can ask questions, and we'd advise you do that. And Graham is here at the end of this session to answer your questions. So please do use the live discussion boxes on your screen there. So also, I'd like to recommend contacting our exhibitors, having a look at what they've got. We haven't had an exhibition for such a long time now. It's an opportunity really to see what's new on the market and meet with suppliers. So please have a look at some of the products and services we've got on here today. And this is just the start. We will have this platform available for you 365 days a year. So today's session, for example, building air quality with Graham, you can watch that back or share it with colleagues. So hopefully it will be useful for you going forwards. So today, the BESA, one of our partners for UK Construction Week, recently released a beginner's guide to indoor air quality. It was an essential publication stripping back the technical terminology to enable the layperson to gain an understanding of what is meant by good air quality and why it's important. So I'm delighted Graham is going to join us today to talk about this. Graham is a chartered engineer and a fellow of the IOR and a member of CIBSE. He's head of technical at the BESA Group and a member of the board of directors of ACRIB and IOR. With over 30 years experience in the HVAC sector, mainly in the building services and air conditioning sector, he spent the last 5 years working with partners, trade associations, to help with compliance and technical needs in this area. So, Graham, welcome, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Dave.
Hand over to you.
Perfect, thank you very much. If I can just share my screen. Okay, so, hang on, I need to, there we go. So, yeah, thanks, Nathan. Thank you for inviting me along today to present our indoor air quality guide. Indoor air quality, indoor environmental quality, common terms being used in conversations in diverse circles really these days. But our concern was how many people actually really understand what the terminology means. How many people understand what constitutes good or clean air, for example. As building service engineers, we've understood for many years that we need to bring outside air into a building. Any occupied building, really, offices, shopping malls. But with outdoor pollution levels sometimes being so poor, we can often be exacerbating issues by drawing foul air into a building. And what about all the pollutants, of course, that are being created inside these buildings? Our beginner's guide to indoor air quality, as Nathan said, is about stripping back some of the terminology. It's the result of several months of collaboration between members of the BESA Health and Wellbeing in Buildings Group, and it's been produced with support from Mitsubishi Electric and the British Lung Foundation. And with it, we hope to debunk this very hot topic. We are bombarded with good eating tips, advice on how much we should and shouldn't be drinking, more fruit, fewer carbs, more fiber, less alcohol, etc. Yet compared to the average 2 kilograms of food and 3 kilograms of fluids that we take into our bodies daily, we inhale approximately 13 kilograms of air every day. And that's when we're sedentary. If you're working out or involved in manual work, for example, then the respiratory rate increases, and so therefore the volume of air that we take into our lungs increases. Poor air quality affects our oxygen levels, which in turn makes us tired, less able to concentrate, irritable, more prone to infection. So it's essential that we address this issue in offices, schools and factories, but also in other public spaces, like I say, like shopping malls, cinemas, restaurants, bars, all places currently being looked at through the new prism of coronavirus contagion. MPs across the House, experts from all backgrounds, everybody is now seeing the importance of ventilation in addressing the COVID mitigation problem. But many still aren't grasping that the reason good ventilation is a COVID mitigation measure is because good ventilation is an indoor air quality improvement measure across the board. But I'll come on to that in a little bit more detail shortly. Building services in general aren't noticed when they're working well. You don't generally sit in an office thinking, I'm really comfortable here. I wonder what air conditioning systems they use. When everything is working, you just don't notice it. It's only when you feel too hot or too cold, or there's a draft, or it starts to feel a bit stuffy, that suddenly you start thinking, this ventilation isn't working right, or this air conditioning system's rubbish. We often refer to the ventilation industry as a Cinderella trade, unseen and overlooked most of the time. And so the newfound attention that the sector is getting at political level has been very welcome indeed. But at the Beza Group, we've been investigating indoor air quality for years. We've been looking at the correlation between poor indoor air quality and the outside conditions. It's one of the reasons our Health and Wellbeing in Buildings Group was created in the first place. Our old office in Lincoln House on Hammersmith Road, we actually found that the indoor air quality was very, very poor in there. And the initial thought was just because we were next to a main road. But actually, the high levels that we were monitoring in the office didn't seem to correlate with busy periods on that road outside. What we actually found, quite alarmingly, was that the air intake for the air handling unit was in the basement car park area. So when cars were idling, particularly in wintertime, people were warming up their engines, all that foul air was just being drawn into our office. So it really highlighted to us the need to educate building services engineers, installation companies, maintenance companies, to try and ensure that we improve the indoor air quality for all. But trying to gain support for these concerns and raise awareness in the wider public arena has really been like hitting a brick wall very frequently. A real lack of understanding and misunderstandings. Too much technical terminology has turned people off, and then it's a very hard sell. So what the Beza Health and Wellbeing in Buildings Group have done is we've created this guide, the Beginner's Guide to Indoor Air Quality, in an attempt to present the crucial facts in a non-technical language, so that everyone can get a grasp of the importance of the issue and take steps to improve the quality of the air in our buildings. Professionals with a responsibility for facilities management of small to medium workplaces who may have no specialist knowledge of the subject matter, building managers at schools and colleges can understand why and how they can make incremental improvements to their indoor environments. And with so many people now working from home, resulting in particulate matter building up in the home more readily now, you'll also start to pull together tips for optimizing the indoor air quality in the home and understand the consequences of not doing so. It's estimated that we spend around 90% of our time indoors in the UK. So to not look closely at the quality of air in the home can have catastrophic consequences on our family's health. Some common indoor pollutants: particulate matter, solids and liquids present in the air around us, produced by cooking, cleaning, the shedding of dust and fibers from clothing and furniture. Carbon dioxide, it's built up just simply by people exhaling. And even with a low buildup of carbon dioxide, it can cause drowsiness and headaches and severely impact concentration levels. We've seen studies in schools, for example, where the carbon dioxide level has severely affected the attention of the children in classrooms. VOCs, volatile organic compounds, again, they're produced by cleaning products, aerosol sprays, scented candles, printers and photocopiers, amongst other things, again causing headaches and eye irritations. And humidity levels, too high and you may produce mold and fungus spores, causing allergic reactions and lung disease. Too low and you could be drying out your eyes, causing irritation and possibly leaving your body more susceptible to infection due to lowering the ability of the body to fend off respiratory attack. Better ventilation and treating the air that is in a building to improve the quality of the air we breathe can bring real, tangible health benefits to the family and the nation as a whole. With a call to action at the end of this document to get people involved in the demands for better air quality, better ventilation, healthier public buildings, healthier school environments for our children, we feel that this Beginner's Guide to Indoor Air Quality is exactly what the world has been waiting for to drive the issue forward and build momentum for a better, cleaner future. As I mentioned at the top, this has got major consequences on the COVID mitigation front also. British Medical Journal publication in April, and an article in that publication, the author said, if we accept that someone in an indoor environment can inhale enough virus to cause infection when more than 2 meters away from the original source, even after the original source has left the building, then air replacement or air cleaning mechanisms become much more important. This means opening windows or installing or upgrading heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems, as outlined in a recent World Health Organization document. People are much more likely to become infected in a room with windows that can't be opened or lacking any ventilation system. So I think the fact that we have respected medical professionals and pandemic professionals writing articles like this in the British Medical Journal now really highlights the fact that the message is starting to get through. We do need to address this issue of indoor air quality. At the BESA Group, we produced our first COVID-19 guidance in February 2020, as it happens. It quickly evolved, and VG002, you can see the extract of the front cover here, is now on its sixth version, and it's been widely used by local authorities, major businesses, and building managers. Even insurance underwriters are asking schools if they have adapted their working practices in line with the BESA guidance. So it's safe to say it's been widely adopted and very well received. The guidance was initially a response to some wildly inaccurate newspaper reporting about how this new virus was being spread. Pre-pandemic status, and when much was still to be learned, obviously, we were answering some of the ridiculously loosely worded claims that air conditioning is spreading the virus. I argued at that time that the issue in the restaurant in Guangdong, which was the focus of the CDC and World Health Organization attention, wasn't that an air conditioning system was running and spreading the virus. It was other factors that were the cause of the virus being spread from one asymptomatic diner to another 8 people in his vicinity in the restaurant. In particular, it was the almost total lack of ventilation or air changes in that restaurant that were to blame. And a subsequent CDC report backed that up about a month later in April last year. Now, it's important to remember this because it's crucial to demonstrate how we've learned so much about the COVID transmission and other issues with indoor air quality in such a short period of time. This scenario, a typical public space, and it's a bar that's been used in this case. It's depicted here in an article on 28th of October last year in El País newspaper. But it's equally applicable in terms of the science to any zone where multiple people come and go. Now, it can be seen, it can be shown to expose a high number of fellow patrons if an infected person is present, if no mitigating measures are taken. So basically, the diagram is showing patient O, who would be an asymptomatic carrier of the virus, going into a bar. There's no tangible ventilation in that bar, and just by coming into contact with those people with the virus being transmitted in an aerosol manner, is very, very quickly spreading to other patrons in that bar. Basically, without any ventilation introducing outside air or air conditioning treating the air in circulation, the viral load becomes so concentrated that there's virtually no chance of avoiding infection. Now, the exposure may be low, and the risk of being seriously ill from this low level of exposure, it may be low as well. And that's for epidemiologists to debate, really. Our position as experts in the air conditioning ventilation sector is to advise on how our systems integrate into buildings and affect airflows. That same bar with good ventilation being introduced will dilute the viral load and massively reduce the exposure of the patrons. So it will see a huge reduction on passive infection rates. The changes of air in the occupied space are crucial in reducing risk of exposure. We know that as humidity levels drop, then particles in the air can travel further due to them being drier and lighter. So it's also crucial to consider humidity levels, airflows, discharge grill locations, and the locations of people in the occupied space in relation to the discharge or return grills. The low humidity situation, by the way, is also why the problems are exacerbated during winter months, when the humidity in the UK is considerably lower. There's what's called a golden band of 40 to 60% relative humidity, that below which point the human body doesn't have the same ability to fend off viral attack in the respiratory tract. And I would actually urge you to look at the website on the screen there, www.40to60rh.com, is a really good resource for finding out about how that humidity level affects the human body. We've had presentations by Dr. Stephanie Taylor, who's in the USA at Harvard Medical School, and she's instrumental in this drive for this, and she really explains the whole thing in a very good non-technical way, which is really good for getting people to understand how humidity actually affects people. Now, the diagram also shows, it shows air being introduced into the building, so you're diluting that viral load. It's important to note as well in this diagram, there's no plastic screens up. Now, when you if you're to take this kind of scenario and think about it in an office environment, for example, an awful lot of people introduced the concept of plastic screens. So where they couldn't separate desks out very far, they put plastic screens up, and the idea is that prevents that direct transmission from aerosols being breathed out, being drawn right across to somebody at the table next to you, the desk next to you. And I know a lot of schools have looked at this, for example, for the school children not passing. The problem is, of course, that when we're relying on good ventilation and ventilation rates coming into buildings, the problem with putting plastic screens up, it completely disrupts the airflow pattern. So what you can find is that it can actually exacerbate the problem rather than really helping it. So there's an awful lot of things that need to be looked at by your ventilation expert to properly prepare a building for going back to full use. So how are we applying this knowledge at the BESA longer term? This British standard, ISO 16814, Building Environment Design Indoor Air Quality, it is a bit out of date now. 2008 it was published. It defines what constitutes acceptable indoor air quality. Now, I've read this definition of what constitutes acceptable indoor air quality several times, and I'm still really no clearer in what it even means in practical terms. It can be interpreted in such a wildly variant way as to mean different things to different people. Where the standard is useful, though, of course, is in its setting out of some of the parameters by which we need to measure good indoor air quality. Specifically, it sets out 3 methods by which you can express good IAQ. By health, short term, such as irritation to the eyes or throat, as we've discussed, or longer term issues such as cancers, asthma, etc. Secondly, by perceived air quality, that's where the majority of occupants express no dissatisfaction with the indoor air on the basis of odour or sensory irritation. Or thirdly, by the ventilation rate. Now, from a design point of view, it's normally the indirect ventilation rate method is used, of course, because a designer can't know at the time of designing the building what the occupancy is likely to be, the occupancy type maybe known, but not the occupancy levels, and not on a day-to-day basis. The designer also can't know how susceptible the occupants will be to odours, etc. So the installation of sufficient ventilation is seen as a measure of ensuring the health measurement doesn't come into play in the first place. It's worth noting, incidentally, that a new British standard, BS 40101 Building Performance Evaluation, is currently being created. PAS 3003 is under creation at the moment into indoor environmental quality, and that's now being fast-tracked to becoming a British standard straight away. Now, what that's trying to do is embed PAS 3003 into the building standards framework, and it's certainly our hope that this new standard will properly define and enforce meaningful levels of pollutant controls that will enhance public health for many years to come. our input into that is trying to ensure that we have meaningful levels. So where, for example, you're looking at CO2 levels, you would be wanting to get those CO2 levels down to 600, starting to warn at 800, triggering alarms at 1000 ppm, for example. The World Health Organization guidance on that has been mentioned before, but it talks about annual averaging weighting of CO2 levels, and it even actually quite worryingly says 5,000 ppm is actually acceptable in some cases. And really, for what we now know about transmission of viruses and what the pandemic has done to the country, in fact the world in the last year, has really driven home the need to focus on that properly and look for much lower levels of pollution in the buildings. The various standards are all fine and well for new builds or for major refurbishment works, for example. But the vast majority of public buildings in use aren't new build, they're existing properties, frequently very old buildings that simply don't lend themselves to large ventilation systems or to centralised air handling units, for example. A number of schemes have popped up over the last year where the quality of air in a building has been measured, and the building owner or manager is given a certificate with a clean bill of health for their property. In reality, that's about as much use as a car MOT certificate. It proves that at that day and at that time, the indoor air quality was okay. But what about the next day, when 50 or 60 more people have come into the office? What about next week, after a commercial cleaning company's been in doing a deep clean, releasing VOCs into the air? What about next month, when the sun is shining and the school teacher has opened the windows wide open to let air into the classroom, but the traffic is building up outside? So obviously the outdoor pollution levels are starting to affect the school children. The only way to properly certify buildings is by introducing ongoing monitoring with reporting in real time to a common open source platform from which a certifying body can properly acknowledge the indoor air quality and that building is actually sufficient and maintained. That's a very crucial point. I've dubbed the concept BASH certification buildings as safe havens. And we're speaking with monitoring companies presently to work with us by providing API integration to an open platform from which we can certify that the end user has satisfactory indoor air quality in their public building. It has long-term benefits of ensuring buildings maintain good indoor air quality. And in the short term, it will give the public the confidence to re-enter public buildings post-pandemic, spending their money and kickstarting the starved economy again. Maybe that's a pipe dream, a utopian vision, maybe, but we'll be working towards that vision becoming a reality over the coming months. In the meantime, I can announce that next week I will be installing indoor air quality monitors in our head office in London and our most populated office in Cumbria, so that at the BESA, at least, we can demonstrate that we are walking the walk, not just talking the talk. I hope to have the data available on our website so that people can see precisely what good practice looks like, how you monitor indoor air quality, and chart the correlation between occupancy of an office and the quality of air that we will be breathing. In this way, we can promote our BASH certification concept in a totally transparent way and hopefully bring more on board with us on that journey to good indoor environmental quality. I think our beginner's guide to our indoor air quality is the first step to achieving that by raising awareness and a better understanding of the issues. The technology exists to do this properly, but we clearly need political buy-in, cross-party, governmental and non-governmental organisations to gain the acceptance of this and drive the scheme forward. And with that in mind, we've just recently written to people like Dr. Chris Whitty and various MPs across the chamber, and in fact in both houses, in the House of Lords as well. And we are talking to people currently about that, and I think it's crucial that we start to see a change of mindset in the way people actually operate their buildings, so that we can drive this forward for the betterment of all, really. And that's my quick whistle-stop tour through our guide to indoor air quality. Nathan.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Graham. That was really interesting. And yeah, I mean, obviously, as an event organizer, looking at doing exhibitions in this September-October window, obviously it's very important we get air quality right, and yeah, very important for us all to get back to life as normal as we can. So. So we've got some questions coming in, and I'm going to kick off with the first one, which comes from Tim. He said it's great to see the move towards providing good ventilation. When do you think this will drive? This drive will include BB101 ventilations in schools that currently promotes natural ventilation as the preferred route, allowing higher CO2 levels than when used with mechanical ventilation systems.
Yes, schools are a particular concern because obviously budgetary constraints are a massive issue for schools. I know the chairman of our Health and Wellbeing and Buildings group is working currently with a couple of schools groups and trying to monitor the indoor air quality that's going on in there, and they're obviously registering that against the classroom sizes starting to build up again, schools going back into full use. So they should have some data pretty soon for that as well. And their intention is to publish that. But it is a problem because, ultimately opening windows is not the answer, particularly for inner city schools. But I think that the experts at SAGE are quite clear in we need to do something. You can't just say, oh well, if the air outside's bad, so keep the windows closed. I think monitoring of the outdoor air pollution levels are crucial in knowing when it's safer to open the windows. And I think the experts have said it's better to have some ventilation than none at all. So even if you were to cut down the window openings where possible, obviously. But again, we come to this situation where one school to the next school can be completely different. We had Gary Radcliffe, who's one of these super head teachers, did one of our webinars last year, and he was talking. There's 3 schools that he's responsible for, and they're all completely different. One's a very modern build, one's very much in a city. One of them's a really old building with very old windows, and it just doesn't lend itself to this concept of opening windows up, even if you can, even if the outdoor air quality isn't an issue. So yeah, it's a big problem in schools. It is being looked at, and people who know the subject matter far better than me are looking very closely at that just now.
Brilliant. Okay. Tim says, thank you very much for that. Very informative. I've got a question from Rebecca. She says, as providers of an indoor monitoring device, do you think that integration with such devices into HVAC systems is beneficial, and will it become more widely used as a mode of operation? And it's a double question. She said, when do you think legislation will change?
Right. Okay. So I mean, our concept of we don't provide indoor air quality monitoring equipment. What we are doing is we're speaking to the manufacturers of the equipment, and what I'm trying to do, they all do much the same kind of thing in terms of how they report it. They all have nice, Windows-based reporting with traffic light kind of systems where green, amber, red to show when the air quality's getting to danger levels and things like that, and they all present them on a nice screen. Our idea is that we can find a way of agreement with those companies, that we can get the data from those companies on an open platform. Obviously they're very controlled data swapping issues to overcome with that, so that we can then provide that on a common kind of platform. So the idea is that obviously, as you're going in, say you have 2 restaurants side by side, one of them, they both have this air quality indication on the door. One of them's green, one of them's red. Which one are you going to go into? I'm going to go into the one that I know the air quality is good because it's green. That's the kind of concept around it. It's a bit like the restaurants having to show their hygiene certificate, for example. It's that kind of prospect. It is very much on a voluntary basis at the moment, because turning to the second part of the question, when will legislation change that? There is an awful lot of political pressure at the moment to introduce changes. Certainly, the coroner's report into Ella Kissi-Debra's death just a couple of months ago changed. It moved the goalposts because it for this first time it embedded into this concept of air pollution being a contributory factor to somebody's death. So it has piled the political pressure, I think, onto the legislators, but trying to get them to put something into legislation is a different ballgame, and we are talking to various government departments, politicians, civil servants, people in the House of Lords, and other lobby groups to try and move that on and drive that agenda on. It's a long process, so anyone who's ever dealt with legislation knows it doesn't happen overnight.
Mm-hmm. Cool. And what, I mean, I guess on the product side of things, what, have you seen or are you concerned about products that don't do what they say they do? Perhaps people trying to look to exploit this current situation.
Yeah, I mean, from last year at this time, I guess I've been inundated with emails from people and contact from people trying to get me to promote air cleaning products and all kinds of things. Some do what they say in the tin, and others don't. And again, with air quality monitoring kit, I think there are good systems and there are bad systems. I think we look at things like the Reset standard of certification, which is a kind of globally recognized level of quality for the products, and it makes sure that the what you call it, the calibration for the products is stays within a tolerance and is checked and things like that. So that's our kind of basic minimum that we would say that we want someone to be Reset or LEED certified or something like that.
Cool. Okay. And then I guess the final question really is around the building regs and Part F, and how do you think this will really change the debate or affect it in the months to come up?
Well, Part F consultation for the first time introduced this concept of improved ventilation in buildings. It also talked about overheating of buildings, which is the first time we've seen government consultations actually acknowledge the fact that we know we have this problem with overheating in buildings. We have so much IT equipment into commercial buildings these days. The heat that's being built up internally is quite substantial, and of course for energy efficiency use and the net zero agenda, we've been insulating buildings more and more and more as the years have gone on, making buildings airtight to try and retain that heat. But of course, by making it airtight, what we've done is we've also retained the bugs in the buildings. So it's really good that Part F has actually recognised that aspect. It's also introduced, as I say, this concept of the standards for the ventilation. Another thing we've seen our members have reported to us very frequently has been really poorly designed and installed ventilation systems. It's a sector of the industry that's largely unregulated. We know that a lot of ventilation systems are purchased and installed by electricians who clearly don't have the skill sets required to understand about air movement and things like that. So that's an important part. So it's a wait and see what happens with the building regulations. It was just a consultation that closed a couple of weeks ago. So when we see the stakeholder and impact assessment stuff that comes out of the consultation, we're really hoping that's going to drive the agenda on properly.
Brilliant. Okay. If you're okay, last question. Well, James has popped a question up. What's your view on the respective UK and Ireland Department of Education's funding of ventilation and ventilation monitoring, CO2 sensors across all schools? Do you think this will go ahead before the autumn/winter of this year?
I would like to say yes, but the cynical me would suspect it may not do. It's the right way forward, and I don't think anybody would dispute it's the right way forward. Everyone agrees we need better ventilation. We need to protect the school kids. We need to have better ventilation in schools. And as I said earlier, the problem schools have got is the lack of funding and the lack of available budget for infrastructure changes like this, because it's quite a substantial investment they need to make in monitoring air quality and improving ventilation a lot of the time. So I think realistically, I'd be surprised if it's enforced in sort of September this year. It may become policy with a transition period then to actually implement.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much. Well, lots of really positive comments on that, Graham, and so people found it very informative. So thank you very much. And obviously, we'll look to see the BISA and yourself at UK Construction Week in October. Hopefully, we'll see what the implications of Part FR and everything there.
It'd be nice to see people in 3D again.
Absolutely, can't wait. So we're looking forward to it. So thank you very much, Graham. And just to remind everyone as well that we've got 2:30, so 25 minutes time, the next part of the Considerate Constructor Scheme National Site Awards. And then at 3 o'clock, we've got Winning with a Data-Led Strategy with James Dean from Sensat. So brilliant. Thank you very much. And we'll